Before we begin, thank you very much to Fire1HP for joining the Patreon campaign over at patreon.com/TJOmega. Genuinely helps keep the channel alive, keeps it afloat, keeps the content coming each and every day, and I thank each and every one of you for helping me do it. Seriously, I could not do this without you guys right now, so thank you very much. Alright, so I wanted to talk about repacks, and not the illicit kind where people are shoplifting by putting old toys in new packages and sending them back to Walmart. No, we're going to talk about the ones that Hasbro does, because there's been a point of contention with them lately in multiple regards. So we're going to be discussing them. We're going to be talking about the history of them and just how far back the practice goes and the various reasons for why it exists. And just before we get started, even if you can't pitch into the Patreon campaign, hit like and subscribe before you leave the video. Also helps me out a lot. Thank you very much for doing it. I'm looking at Legacy Blaster right now, who is previously Kingdom Blaster, and as far as repacks go, he's kind of the way that I think they should be done, and the way I've seen them done recently. We saw the same thing with Kingdom Optimus Prime becoming rather Earthrise Optimus Prime becoming Kingdom Optimus Prime, where a toy released late in the cycle of the series gets shifted over to the first wave of the next series, which I think is actually the right way to do it. In the past, it was pretty much a given that the last wave of toys was going to end up being the hardest to get and the most expensive ones at secondary market, because at that point retailers didn't want to restock the old stuff that had been sitting there for a year, especially if there's been some shelf warmers in the line they can't get rid of. They're interested in the new stuff, because by the time they give you like the final wave of the next movie line, they're already doing the solicits for the next wave of the cartoon line. So retailers want the new stuff, not another wave of the old stuff. I remember during Revenge of the Fallen, Rampage's repaint, the red version, was actually way harder to get. I remember seeing it and regretting passing on it, because in my head I knew that's probably going to be worth something at some point. And it is. It was a very hard repaint to get. It was the tail end of the toy line. The new toy line was on the way. The only stores that got it in were ones that desperately needed a restock at the time and just happened to order at the right little window, before the new stuff was announced. So all of those like last wave toys get really dicey to find after the fact. So when those kind of cross over into the new line, that's kind of a great thing. And it's one big advantage to Hasbro's current mindset of keeping everything in the same aesthetic and in the same general style and engineering level. And lets them get away with that. Because obviously you couldn't like obviously like a last wave movie toy isn't going to get released during wave 1 animated. That doesn't work. But this works. And it's the kind of thing I wish would be done more often. If it's hard to find, repack it. I know there's plenty of people still after Earthrise cone heads because it was so hard to come by. But now there are issues with this practice. We have an entire toy line that began as a set of repacks. Buzzworthy Bumblebee filled with not only previously released Bumblebee toys, but some Bumblebee adjacent characters like Shatter and Dropkick, etc., who we'd already gotten at retail, but they wanted to push out a few more copies of them. Now, at this point, we're going to go over an old rumor, an old suspicion, and we're going to completely put it to bed. These are not unsold toys that have been repackaged. The long-standing myth is that the toys that just don't sell, they get sent back, and Hasbro just puts them in new packaging and sends them out again. Imagine this. You've got, let's say, 100,000 units of a toy that haven't sold at all these different retailers. And you're thinking back in the day when you had like Walmart and Target and KB Toys and Toys R Us and all these other smaller retailers that all had your like a deluxe Transformer on hand. And it's just not selling. So we're going to send all of these back to Hasbro's warehouse somewhere off in California, we're going to get all of them packed back into new shipping crates and put back on a barge, and the barge is going to go all the way back to Asia. It's going to get back to the factory. Everything's going to get unpacked again. Everything's going to get ripped out of its original packaging. All the pieces are going to be put into new packaging, seal it back up into new crates, send it back across the barge again, and then ship it out to tens of thousands of retailers across America and then across to the rest of the world. That's really expensive. That's a lot of unnecessary shipping. The truth of the matter is, if it goes unsold for that long, it's probably going to end up in a landfill somewhere. It's a shame to admit, but that's probably what happens to a lot of stuff that just does not ever sell. And it's just far cheaper for Hasbro to just run the toy again at the factory level and ship it out. Shipping is expensive. Shipping that huge amount of freight is exceptionally expensive. To do it two ways just to get a toy they've already made back out onto the shelves, impractical. Absolutely impractical. This is just new stuff that they just reran because it's easier to rerun something than it is to develop a new deco for it or go through the cost of a brand new tooling. It's just cheaper that way. And in a line like Buzzworthy, okay, fine. I can kind of understand that. We do it a lot in Cyberverse as well. Here we've got the Buzzworthy Bumblebee 4-pack of Cyberverse toys. They're all the exact same figures. And Cyberverse is guilty of this a lot, but that is because it is a kid's cartoon brand, and the regular characters and toys need to be visible in the stores often. I think someone did a photo, I saw it on Twitter, where someone had all 5 packaging variants of the one-step Bumblebee toy because they just kept re-releasing it. And keep in mind, there's a reason the retailers bought that toy for a 5th time. It's hard to kind of dispute that. So, yeah, repaint, they've been happening a lot lately. When it gets a little bit dicey is when we get into things like Kingdom Wheeljack here, who was already Earthrise Wheeljack, and is now, according to computer listings, slated to become Legacy Wheeljack as well. 3 lines in a row, the Wheeljack toy was released. 2 lines in a row, the RC toy was released. We did the same thing with Optimus Prime. Like I said, there's kind of like there's a reason for that. Now, if it's a popular toy that didn't get enough release and there is still a high demand for it, okay, fine. I don't really mind you re-releasing it in another wave. The fact that RC got a Kingdom re-release is kind of ridiculous for how unpopular that toy is. And Hasbro should have known at the design level that this is not a toy that's going to go over well with fans. It's hitting a certain market, it's hitting a certain demand that we have not met with RC in the past, but it's such a minute one, and it doesn't get past the fact that the toy's overall quality is not there. Why they decided to re-release it, I don't know. Why they're deciding to do Wheeljack again, I don't know. This just kind of screams of cost cutting. This just screams of we don't want to spend the money to develop a new toy or even to repaint a figure when we can just fill out the line with a previously popular toy. With Wheeljack, I just don't understand. Why can't you, surely it can't, you've done so many repaints to get more money out of a mold. This is a way of getting even more money than that out of the mold because they don't have to do anything different. Absolutely nothing different except change the tray it's packed in. That's it. But there's so much, there's so many options, if you're going to do Wheeljack again, why not repaint him into Slicer? This could be Kingdom Slicer we are looking at. It would have been a fun little homage release to get out. In Legacy, Wheeljack really should be Cybertron Downshift. Translucent orange, green, and black color scheme. Done. And you could have gotten away with it fine. I think a lot of people would actually be down for that. I would be down for that. Nope. Wheeljack again because it's the cheapest way of filling out the line. We do know that Kingdom lost quite a few figures that they intended to do. We lost a Sabertooth Fossilizer that was supposed to be on the Maximal side. We apparently lost a brand new Polar Claw toy. We lost quite a few figures due to time or budget constraints. And somewhere along the line, we lost a Gears too. We lost a deluxe Gears toy, and we gained a re-release of Wheeljack. That's how that goes. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. So I don't know. I don't know Hasbro budgeting. I'm not an accountant of in any way, shape, or form. I don't know why this is acceptable when it seems like they would sell more units of something that is new that collectors would be more interested in simply than filling out a wave. Because there's, of course, in the end of the day, they aren't selling to you and me, they're selling to the retailers. At that point, their money's made. They don't really care what happens to the stock. So if they can get away with repacking a figure and sending it back out for a third time, that's what they're going to do. And we're the ones who have to suck it up. So many ways that could have been done better, and I'm disappointed that it hasn't been done better. But this is not a new practice in the least. In the Universe line, it used to be this bastion of really interesting and weird repaints, and then it just became a reissue line for secondary markets. And by secondary markets, I mean outside of your big retailers and Toys R Us, you had your secondary stores, you know, like a Walgreens. I'm trying to think of where I like actually saw some of this in person. It's the kind of stuff you get at like a store where you don't expect to find a Transformer. They just wanted some stock of it. So repacks were a really cheap way of actually providing that to people. So things like Energon Barricade here ended up as a Universe figure, and Universe did this all over the place. You know, here's during the 25th anniversary line, they did a I think even like dollar stores that didn't sell that sold things that cost more than $1 back when that was a thing to joke about. They would have things like this. Cybertron re-releases in Universe style packaging, Universe 2.0 style packaging, no less. So that'll tell you how long this has been going on. But yeah, completely unchanged. And they did a lot of the Cybertron basics this way. There's a few Energon basics or Scout class figures that came this way. So you had a lot of like familiar faces getting released for super cheap because it's just cheaper to rerun the mold. They got a lot of spy changers and minicons individually released as well during RID and during Universe 1.0. At the very least, they packed in these little mini tins to store them in. I never saw the point of that. It seems like the mini tin would take up a lot more space than the minicon would. I don't know. Like, it's just weird to me how throwing a tin into something is somehow supposed to make it more appealing to buy. I'm the same way with like Pokemon cards. Like it's just a fancy metal box at that point. You want what's inside, and this time it's not even inside. It's just like here's a box. Here's a box inside the box to put your toy back in a box before you put it in your toy box. And of course, they came out in dollar stores as well. Just repacks of Spy Changer repaints that they had already done. So this is mid 2000s era, somewhere around there, just so you realize, okay, yeah, like we're almost 20 years of this being a thing so far. We got farther to go, though. And it gets to ridiculous points. Here's Universe Unicron, a repack of Armada Unicron. Picture provided by TransformersLand.com, by the way. Hope you're out there watching. Thank you very much for being a bastion of really nice photos for really obscure things. Toys R Us exclusive, but of course now, like, even Unicron was not safe from being repacked at that size. And Unicron is one of the most infamous repacks of all time. Here we have Unicron in Energon packaging, but it is still the original release. The first run of Armada Unicron was so overproduced and sold so slowly that they had to put more excess stock in the upcoming repaints box and ship that out as the first wave of your Supreme class figures for Energon instead of the intended repaint on the box. Funny how that works out. So he became pretty infamous for being like an overproduced toy that needed to be repacked, you know? And sometimes that is why repacks happen. But that's the only one where it's like absolutely confirmed. Just too many were made. Another reason, it was a hard figure to find at first, so we're going to repack it again. Again, that should be the way that it should be done. In alternators, that's what a lot of these no, like fish tank looking boxes were for. They re-released a lot of the previously hard to find alternators in the first waves of the third iteration of alternator packaging. This this gets dicey again. They, this is a case of there was demand for more, but not really that much demand to put them at retail. If they'd repacked them as like store exclusives, Amazon only, Toys Toys R Us only, I think you would have been fine. But they put it back out in mass retail, and there just wasn't enough interest in it. So what was originally a rare figure became a shelf warmer because they just ran it way, way, way too much. And that is what happens sometimes. All right. For a long time, Hasbro was really reluctant to actually produce anything that wasn't like somewhat different in some way, shape, or form. So what we ended up with here were very, very minor repaints. Just like the most basic amount that we needed to do just to make sure we could call it a new release. So the movie line was really infamous for this because we did have uh, a short stock of the first wave of main characters who were in the movie. Everyone still wanted them, so we got the Allspark empowered versions that were only at Target. Same exact figures, just a little bit more baby blue thrown in. And nothing really for collectors. Collectors just thought the baby blue looked weird on some of them. That was just to make sure they got more out for your casual audience. They did this in Beast Wars too. When Beast Wars went on to Fox Kids, they decided it was probably a good idea to actually have Beast Wars characters that were out on shelves that matched the first season of the cartoon that Fox Kids was now airing. So we got very, very minor variations of some characters. These are essentially repaints, but some of them, like Cheetor, are so minor you probably wouldn't notice at first that those spots aren't really the right color. So that's the borderline. But the point is, for a while, even if it was the most minor variation, they needed to make sure some variation was in there. So that's where they were for most of the 90s. But we can go older. Generation 2, and again, Transformers Land coming to the rescue on this photo as well. A lot of G2 toys were in that similar vein of slightly repainted, enough to call it a different release, but there were some that were just straight up the G1 toy. The rarest of the waves of the Dinobots, obviously, were in the G1 colors. They were repacks, or in this case, enough time had gone by, call it a reissue if you'd like. But point standing, this is about the first time where I can remember them just straight up reissuing a toy back out into normal markets, completely unchanged. So that's like a prevalent example, but it's not the oldest example. For that, we can go a little bit farther back and overseas. Back in the UK in the very early 90s, 1990, I believe, in the UK, New Zealand, Australia, those markets, they got Transformers Classics. Not the 2006 line collectors loved, but actual reissue line of previously released Transformers. These account as some of the oldest rare repacks of G1 characters that there ever were. They did combiner teams this way. They did select most popular characters like Prime and Jazz. Just another way of getting them back out on the shelves. But again, enough time has passed that we could probably call that a reissue. We're talking like 1984 to 1990, so it's a 6-year gap between releases. We can go newer. Well, we can go older, but as far as as a new repack, we can go older. We can go, yeah. I lost it there. The point is, there's one step beyond. If we want to go to the earliest, we have to go to Pretenders. We have to go to late 80s Transformers to get what we can consider to be the very first time Hasbro repacked something into a different form. Most of the classic Pretenders were released just like all the other Pretenders. However, if you're in Japan, those classic Pretenders came in a 4-pack without the shells. They were just basic versions of classic characters. In America, if you went into a Kmart, you might actually be able to find classic Pretenders sans shells in more traditional old-style packaging. No mention of the shell, no mention of the Pretender gimmick whatsoever. It's just a version of the classic Transformer character. This was Transformer Legends. Long before Marvel used the line, it was the first line, the first sub-line that we ever got for Transformers, specifically for reissuing classic characters just the way they were, or at least producing new versions of those characters. Yes, they were repacks of the Pretenders, but you could get them more affordably than getting the shell, and let's be honest, for a collector market that were just starting to emerge in the late 80s, what you wanted was just, the character itself. And that is about as early of a repack for Transformers as I could actually find. This has been going on since the late G1. For almost as long as the franchise has existed, repacking toys has existed for the sake of making an extra buck, for the sake of reissuing something that was popular, or just for the sake of, filling out a line. Whatever it happened to be. We've had this for the entirety of Transformers history. So, I mean, if you really want to think about it, technically, even the G1 toys are Diaclone repacks. So, depending on your definition at that point. Just to say, we've been at this for a long, long time, and we'll probably be at it for a lot longer. The only concern now is, let's make sure Hasbro doesn't go too far with it. Because, as it is, I don't want to see RC. I don't want to see Wheeljack for a fourth time. Let's put it that way. Thank you guys for watching me. Thank you for diving into this history lesson with me. And I will see you tomorrow for yet another video. History lesson, review. I don't know what it's going to be yet. That's part of the fun. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.